Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Diana Sanchez, and welcome to NEC's Installation Projectors and SSL Technologies webinar with Senior Product Manager Rich McPherson and Channel Marketing Manager Danielle Moore from NEC, winner of System Contractor News Stellar Service, Best Manufacturers Rep Award, and Rave's 2015 Digital Signage Champs Award for Best New Digital Signage. Before we start, here's a little bit about IAVI. At IAVI, we're very proud to make our debut to INC's 5000th annual ranking of the fastest growing private companies in America. We've been around since 1997, and our sales team have almost 200 years of combined AV experience in the field of Pro AV sales with multiple AV certifications and offices across the country. We carry and stock your favorite brands, and each member of our sales team is required to attend regular trainings on the latest products offered by our manufacturer partners. We have expertise in specifying complete solutions in multiple vertical markets, and no project is too large or too small. We're proud to serve as a one-stop shop for hardware and accessories with an experienced logistics team that offers same-day, nationwide shipping for just-in-time delivery on projects that are time-sensitive. IVI is growing, and we're ecstatic that we just opened a West Coast distribution facility in Salt Lake City, Utah. We have a registration expert at our bid desk who can save you valuable time and increase your profits by providing assistance for registration projects. We also make sure to keep you updated on the manufacturer's most current spiffs and rebate programs. We're very excited to announce we will be releasing the quarterly update with our latest products to our interactive product guide next month in October. You can download our app in the platform of your choice at ivi.com. We're thrilled to be with Danielle and Rich today. If everybody is ready, I'd like to get us started. Danielle, please take it over.
Thank you, Diana. Hi, everyone. Before I turn it over to Rich, I just want to note a few housekeeping things. If you do have questions, please type them in the chat box, and we will get to them throughout the presentation. If for some reason we do miss them, then we actually will get to them at the end. Diana, really quick, do you have the slides up on the screen?
Yes, I can see your screen, Danielle. We're definitely sharing your screen now. Do you have your...
Oh, okay. I thought you had the slides up and we were just going to take control. That's what I thought we were doing.
Oh, okay. We can also do it that way, actually, because I do have the slides up. So,
Okay.
yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And then you just go ahead and let me know. And I will be changing the slides as we go along, okay?
Okay. And there we go. Okay.
And we'll be up shortly. Here we go. Okay, we're all set to go, Danielle.
We're grabbing control, sorry.
Perfect, no worries.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody's day is going well. Let's go to the first slide. Do you have control? Okay. So on the agenda today, we'll have the projector product families, and what we're referring to there is just the SSL type of projectors. The technology itself, the different types of SSL, which is part of that technology, the vertical markets, and what makes SSL important for these new vertical markets, the projectors themselves, and I'm talking more specifications on those projectors, so the basic specifications. Next slide, please. So light source nomenclature, I'm sure that everybody is somewhat familiar with solid state products in the market, but I want to make sure that everybody understands the different technology names that are out there and how they relate to either NEC or some of the other manufacturers. So go ahead and advance. So SSL, we refer to that as a solid state light source. You may see that also designated as an SSLS, solid state light source, but typically it's an SSL. It's a light producing system that is not lamp based. One other nomenclature I don't have on there is called a LIP. So it's a laser illuminated projector. So you may hear that as well out in the marketplace. There's under that SSL style, there is what was considered a hybrid. So it's a solid state light source combined with other elements to create colors. So what that's referring to is in the typical lamp-based scenario, we would have a lamp that is creating the light source and then going through dichroics to create color. In this situation, we use either LED for some of the light, laser for some of the light, and then a phosphor wheel to create the different colors. That is not something that NEC uses. We do not use the LED laser phosphor. That is what Casio and some Panasonic projectors use, and there may be some other manufacturers out there, but those are the two main manufacturers that use that technology. We use laser phosphor, and that's something that we would use for moving forward on a majority of our projectors that are anywhere from 5,000 lumens and above. Okay? There is also LED, so that is a red, green, and blue LED technology. So as you know, any other LED product out there, this is the same, basically the same thing. The only difference is we're using the LEDs to generate light. There is a downside, however, to this technology. And the downside is the fact that it's very inefficient. So we can create a 1,000 lumen product that may be in our 3.5 pound projector, but when we go to 2,000 lumens, we may have to increase the product size from 3.5 pounds at least to almost a 20-pound projector. So the inefficiency, as you can see just from the size of the cabinet and how it would have to go, you would have to really increase the size of the cabinet just to get the 2,000 lumens out of the projector. So that's one of the main reasons that you don't see LED as the main light source for larger brightness projectors. And last but not least is what's considered the RGB laser. So that's red, green, and blue lasers. This is what we consider the only pure laser on the market. That's, and any real all the manufacturers truly think that way. However, there's one statement I'm going to make, and if you hit the advance button, you'll see that there is a manufacturer on the market. Go ahead, you can advance one. And so here it says pure laser. But some competitors, and I'll say the name Panasonic, they're listing in their brochure that it's a pure laser system, even though they're not. They're actually using a laser phosphor, but they're just using it as a pure laser. They're laying pure laser as a nomenclature for their laser phosphor system. But truly, pure laser is if it's red, green, and blue laser. That's the real industry standard. Is one technology better than the other? Well, there's advantages either way. So ultimately, RGB laser is the best. However, it is extremely expensive. LED is the technology that can make the smallest projector along with some laser phosphor. So there's not necessarily one that is completely better than the other. There are advantages and disadvantages of all the different technologies. But that's, overall, that's solid state projectors. Go ahead. So here's just a picture of three of the models that we currently carry. On the left-hand side is the P502, the upper right-hand side is the PX602, and the bottom image is what is considered our PH1201QL. I'll just bypass this because it's just showing images on this page. Next slide. So here are the solid-state light sources. Here's just to give you a better idea, even though I described what the SSL technology was. Here is an RGB laser system, which is our NC1040L. As you can see, there's red lasers, green lasers, as well as blue lasers. Next slide. Here's the LED L102W, which is an LED-based device. So it's here on the right-hand side, you can see there's an LED for blue, an LED for red, and an LED for green. So, and it's not one single LED and it's not one single laser, but it's just showing you that there's individual colors are derived from either the lasers or from the LEDs. Next slide. On the left-hand side there is the laser phosphor system, which is our PX system. So PX602WL as well as the PX602UL. It is a single chip DLP product, but it's using blue laser in order to create the blue light, and then it's using the phosphor wheel at the bottom there, which is creating either yellow or green light, and the yellow is then transmitted into red and using the color wheel at the top. Next slide. In the middle is the laser phosphor system of the P502WL and P502HL, and this is showing again blue laser being utilized for the light source, and then yellow phosphor being utilized to create the red and the green. I will tell you that this particular slide is not a true representation of the P502, so when you talk with customers, you can give them this slide, but it's not completely accurate, and the reason it's not is we have to give a somewhat modified representation because it's a patent pending design. So it's not truly exactly as you see it, but it's close enough for our conversation here. Next slide. And then last but not least, on the PH1201QL, the PH1202HL, we have a laser phosphor system. You can see here there's two banks of blue laser, one blue laser for the blue signal, and then one set of blue lasers for the red and green going into that yellow phosphor. So that allows us to achieve a much higher brightness. So on the middle with the 502, we have a single bank of lasers for the blue, or for all the light source, but on the right-hand side, because it's 12,000 lumens, we have dual banks of the blue laser. That's the major difference. Now, just to talk about the phosphor itself, the 602 on the left-hand side has yellow and green, and the green is a small portion of the image, or the color wheel, or phosphor wheel itself, so it's not as exposed to the amount of heat that would create any problems. So we leave that green in there, but on the yellow phosphor for the P502 and the pH systems, we actually just went to a yellow phosphor, and the reason being is it handles heat that is being driven from the lasers themselves, as well as longevity and color rendition. So for the most part, everything that we will have moving forward will be that yellow phosphor as our medium to create the red and green images. Okay, next slide. So let's look at the vertical markets that we have available to us, and this is really from the solid state standpoint. So you'll notice that there's some different verticals in here that we traditionally have not seen projectors be marketed to. Obviously there are some that are utilized today and have been forever, but the corporate and education, of course, that's a standard. Rental and staging, museums and house of worship are normal, but digital signage, theme parks, simulation, yes, we have had lamp-based technology go there, but because of the life of the lamp-based systems, a lot of simulation has actually moved to large screen displays or large flat panels, however you want to determine that. Also, control room and video monitoring, some of you may be familiar, but that's going to be like a network operations center, like a police station or a bus terminal or bus system, not the terminal, but a bus system where they're monitoring all the buses that are driving around the city. Those locations in the past were CRT projectors, slowly went to lamp-based technology, and some have actually switched over to large screen video walls. So we're trying to bring back some projectors to those environments, mainly because of the fact that we can run SSL and 24/7 applications while at the same time having this completely seamless image. Next slide. So let's look at some of the applications. So if we look at a small to medium room, things to consider that would be relevant to that application, up to 100-inch screen, and realistically that should be a 110-inch screen, but for reference we'll use 100. We have to consider ambient lighting conditions, what kind of resolution we want the projector to be, as well as the number of people that may be viewing this image from in that particular room. So that's 10 to 50 people. Next. It's best suited with the following projectors, the P series, the P502WL, P502HL. Typical room examples, boardrooms, small classrooms, or labs within the education environment. And benefits 5,000 lumens and above, high contrast ratios, long lamp life, and that will necessarily be true for this scenario, and then wireless connectivity. And if we hit next, I'll show you the benefits of upgrading from a typical lamp-based system to the solid state or laser phosphor. So stable color and brightness, tilt-free, long life, education, extremely important, easy maintenance or no maintenance at all for the most part. Portrait mode, lamp-free and mercury-free, and then there's sealed engines. I'm going to come back before we go farther because I don't have those advantages spelled out separately farther in the presentation. I want to really talk to you about the stable color and brightness. It's extremely important to understand with lamp-based technology, the typical life, depending on the category, but we're talking 5,000 lumens and above. Lamp life doesn't really exceed 4,000 lumens, and if you're lucky, for the most part, you're looking at 2,500 to 3,000 hours of life. With solid state, you're looking at 20,000 hours at maximum brightness. So you can see the advantage is a much longer lifetime for the product. That being said, part of that stable color and brightness is with lamp-based technology, colors tend to change, drift a little bit over time with the lamp itself decaying, as well as the brightness, of course, drops down. With solid state, because of the technology inherent in the technology, colors don't really drift, but more importantly, the brightness stays more controlled, I would say. We can actually set the brightness to a certain point in space, maybe it's 50%, 60%, 70%, and the projector is intelligent enough to keep it there for almost the length of the time of the life of the laser. So you're not only getting a longer life, but you're getting a consistent brightness across time. So there's many things that are a big advantage when we move to SSL. Next slide. Here's just some, and you can go through this whole, just hit it a few times, and I think it'll, most of it is a repeat in a sense of the last slide. One more. And I'll talk to this slide itself. So meeting the large rooms, we look at 150-inch screen size and bigger. Of course, the ambient lighting conditions, resolution, connectivity. And what we're referring to there is what type of connections do the customers actually need in the room for this type of situation. And it may be just digital connections, it may be analog, we don't know. But typically when you get into a projector this size, there are many different connectors on the projector that aren't necessarily able to be fit into the cabinet of a smaller projector. Best suited projectors here in that brightness category, and this is at the low end of 150-inch screen, but the PX602, either the WL or UL, and then the typical room examples, conference room, medium to large classroom, and a lab. But the benefits change a little bit. So we get into 6,000 lumens and above. We get into interchangeable lenses. So the P series had a fixed zoom lens, where when we get into the PX series and above, we actually have interchangeable lenses, which allows us installation flexibility by placing the projector in different locations within the room. You may have some applications that require stacking or edge blending. Where stacking, we're creating a brighter image, doubling the brightness, whereas if we have edge blending, we're creating either a panoramic image, or we may just simply want to use 4 projectors to create one larger image but keep it bright, so you're putting 6,000 lumens in each quadrant. And then of course there's lens shift, so that could be powered or electronic. That lens shift actually falls back on that P series too, because that has lens shift. Now I'm not going to really talk about those SSL upgrades because we already understand what those are, so the same benefits are there from an SSL standpoint. Okay, next slide. And again, you can click through this again. And one more. And then things to consider from a large hall standpoint, typically it's 180-inch screen size or bigger. Ambient lighting conditions, resolution, room orientation. Installation conditions, are there things in the room that may create problems for an installation and that we have to consider, and that comes into play with the optional lenses as well as the lens shift capabilities. 100 to 200 people in the room itself, and then best suited projectors for this application is either the PH1202HL or the PH1201QL. This should be PH1201QL. Typical room examples: lecture halls, theaters. Theaters, when we say theater in this scenario, we're referring to theaters that may be in some corporate locations, some hotels, or within a education environment. Benefits: 12,000 lumens and above, installation flexibility, and up to 4K resolution. Up to 4K resolution is actually the PH1201QL, which I'll talk about more in a separate slide. Same benefits from the upgrade to SSL. Next slide, please.
Hi, Rich. We actually have a question from Sarah. She would like to know, is there a limit to the size of screen that laser and phosphor projectors can be specified for? And how about with a short throw lens?
That's a really good question. Let's consider not lamp-based or solid-state devices, but projection in general. Yeah, when we're looking at a 5,000 lumen projector, that's why when we started the slides, we really look at it as, you know, that 100 to probably 150 inch screen, we would use a 5,000 lumen product. 150 to probably 180, we would use a 6,000 lumen product to recommend 6,000 to 7,000 lumens. Anything greater than that, we're looking at the need for 12,000. Now, that can all change depending on the environment. When I say that, it really depends on what kind of ambient lighting conditions we're experiencing. So if it's a well-controlled environment, I'm going to give you an example. If we look at a digital cinema projector, so looking at a theater that you go, you know, when you go to the movies, there may be projectors that are only running at 7,000 lumens, but they may be a 28 to 8, maybe even 36 foot wide screen, but it's only 7,000 lumens. Well, that's okay because we're completely controlling the environment. So we know that we can turn the lights down and everything around us is really black, other than the exit sign and some lights on the stairwell. So it really depends on what you're going to do. When we're talking here, in this situation, most of the examples that I showed have images in them that are really kind of well lit, ambient lighting rooms. So you need more firepower. So the more the light in the room, the more firepower you need from the projector to hit the screen so that it's viewable. So it's really, there's many factors as to how to determine that. We're working on a system that will allow you to go onto our website, actually configure a room, put in the ambient lighting conditions of the room, and it will help determine what projector is best suited for your application. So that's going to be hopefully available fairly soon, but it'll take into account all the stuff that we're talking about: screen size, ambient lighting conditions, resolution, distance, draw distance requirements, and everything to help you determine what projector is best for that situation. So I think I answered it, but if I didn't, do you need me to expand a little bit more on that? But it's not a. I want you to understand, it's not a scenario where it's lamp-based versus SSL. It's light-based. It's just pure brightness that's going to hit the screen versus what the ambient lighting conditions and screen sizes are.
Thank you, Rich. I think we answered Sarah's question. I don't hear back from her yet, but
Okay.
I will let you know, and then we can continue.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. So here's just a different look at things. One avenue that we have not traditionally played in. Some projector manufacturers have had some projectors in digital signage, but for the most part, it has been cost prohibitive just because of the fact that the lamps themselves and the amount of light we need is very expensive. So when we're looking at that 6,000 lumens and above or 5,000 lumens and above, and we're replacing lamps every 1,500 hours to 3,000 hours, you can understand it's not something that your end users are going to really want to be doing. So when we look at digital signage now, we can turn the tables around and not only have the knowledge that we're not going to be replacing lamps all the time, but we can do different things than we've ever done before. So just to give you an idea, looking at it from a digital signage, museums, retail, any kind of, showroom. I'm not going to list all the models. You guys, I don't have to read those. You can see those. The typical screen size is anywhere from 100 inch and greater. Usually it's going to be a fairly high ambient lighting condition application. So when we look at a mall or a retail location, there's usually a lot of light within the store or in the concourse of a mall or in the concourse of a train station or an airport. So there's usually quite a bit of ambient light, so we have to compensate for that. Marketing and branding, very important when we're looking at solid state versus lamp technology. We have a little bit more flexibility with solid state to adjust the color rendition of the projector so that it matches what the marketing and branding is being set forth. Coca-Cola doesn't want their the red being not perfect, or John Deere doesn't want green being the correct green. So you can understand that scenario. Life-size images, and what we're saying there is if you look at the middle image, there's just a kind of life-size image, seamless, of models with clothing in a store. So it's just something different where they're modeling the clothing instead of just you seeing it on the shelf. Banners and mood enhancing, and banners being in the center or mood enhancing in the center, that right-hand image, the top right-hand image, we're just projecting onto a piece of cloth. So it's kind of setting a mood within the shopping center. Another avenue that we created back at our national sales meeting is we actually did uplighting, not uplighting from the floor, but we actually had lighting on the wall to create a mood depending on the content that we were presenting to our sales team. We're just projecting our projected images using our projectors on the side walls. At the top image on the left, top image, you can see that that's actually in a museum, and that is just content being played behind a model, and whatever that they're trying to portray there, they could create the content for that. But again, most important thing that we have to consider here is all those images are bezel free. All those images can be unique shapes, and we can take that down to the bottom right-hand corner. We're actually projecting onto dancers on a dance floor. So we're projecting images from a projector onto the bodies of the women that were dancing, just to create a different effect to the audience. And then projection mapping, and if you're not familiar, projection mapping is placing it on different surfaces at the same time. So as we all know, traditional projection technology is you have a projector, you're shining on a screen, and you're doing a presentation, and we want to get away from the thought process that that's all we have. So projection mapping is creating the ability to place it on different surfaces so that you can highlight different things on that surface or create a different illusion than we've ever been able to before. So just different things that you can do from the digital signage standpoint that we cannot do from a large screen display standpoint. And I can't emphasize the bezel free as much as I'd like to, or the unique shapes, but it's really important to understand that from a marketing standpoint, we're not tied to a specific shape. We can create any shape and form that we want to, because we can create content to work within that shape. So just an example, BMW car shape, or a Corvette, and maybe Chevy wants us to create an image of a Corvette and have content within that. You can create that and create the content to just fall within that space, and everything around it is black. You can't do that with large format. So it's just a little bit different application, but now we can do that with solid state projectors because we don't have to worry about lamp technology and the amount of hours and expense it would be to use those. So next slide. Oh, again, the advantages. So I'm going to try to bypass that every time, but I use that for a presentation for our national sales meeting, and I wanted to really push across to our sales team the advantages. So you'll see that on every slide, just so you're aware. Museum or house of worship. Here's the application. So large meeting rooms, medium-sized halls. It could actually be the sanctuary. So if you look at the right-hand side, the two top images are actually in museums, and you can see ultra short throw projectors as well as the other solid state projectors that were actually creating images on the wall. And then in the bottom two images, that's actually different sanctuaries, two different applications. On the left-hand side is your standard projector image on a rectangular screen. But on the right-hand side is the whole front of the sanctuary is a edge blended image that use multiple projectors. So typically it's a 100-inch screen or above. It could be a curved screen. It could be high ambient lighting conditions. Maybe it's controlled. Life-size images, mood enhancing, and we have seen some images from different churches that are actually, instead of just having the projected image in the front, even though it's edge blended, they will do the same thing that I spoke about with us at the NSM, where we actually put projected images on the sidewalls. A lot of the mega churches are doing the same. It's not necessarily content that people can read or realistically make an impact that they have to pay attention, but it does set a mood as far as what is happening in the front. And then, of course, projection mapping, and that's usually what we consider part of the edge blending scenario. Okay, next slide, please. We can go right past that. Control room, mission critical. So typically it's rear projection. It could be a police or fire departments or transportation organization. And what's really important here, and you're not going to hear it or you're not going to see it in writing because people will expect the warranty to extend this far, but when we look at a typical control room, they're almost always rear projection. Because of that fact, we have better control of the output of the laser modules and the light source itself. Well, that's fantastic because what it does is it actually extends the life of the laser modules. So when we say 20,000 hours in our literature for our lifetime of the system, that's because we're saying that's at maximum brightness. If we change that brightness to 80%, 70%, 60%, whatever it may be, we can actually extend the life of the laser modules. Yeah, that's a great thing your customer wants to hear, but it's also not a great thing if we want to sell more products. So, you're in that same boat where you want to sell products, so keep that in mind at the same time. But the advantage there is we're not only extending the life, but because we're changing that brightness down to a different level, we're keeping the brightness output consistent. So we're putting it what we call a constant brightness level, which allows it to stay constant for a much longer period of time. So the customer, your customers in these applications, such as the mission critical control room, they wouldn't see any decay in their image for 20+ thousand hours. So there's some real advantages to doing what we're creating images as we're talking about and using solid state devices. Next slide. Entertainment, that kind of falls within that simulation scenario. So simulation in theme parks, it could be entertainment or it could just be a flight simulator, a boat simulator, car simulator, anything to that effect. So here we have a car simulator and we have I do believe that's a airplane simulator on the bottom right. I can't really tell from the picture, but I do believe that that's what it was. But a lot of times now we're seeing flight or simulation actually be changed over to large screens and then they create scenes. Well, here's a way to go back to a seamless image, run the projectors at a much lower brightness, keep it constant image as well as from a stable standpoint as far as color and brightness, and not have to worry about that changing over time. Next screen. Next slide, sorry. Rental and staging. Here it's hotel rentals, concert events, shows. A lot of times in concert events, lately you haven't seen so many of the projection devices at the center of the screen. There'll be side fills on the edges or up above, and you'll see LED in the center, which is typically going to be the case, but we still see projection at shows from a concert standpoint. But hotel rentals, it's huge. The image on the right-hand side, and if you notice, all the main bullet points on the left-hand side hasn't really changed, and that's because solid state provides you all these same, regardless of the type of application or type of vertical, The advantages are the same. So I don't have to read all those. It's basically the same thing over and over. The image on the right-hand side actually is our national sales meeting. So as you can see from the little rectangular boxes or square boxes and the screen itself, we actually created some mapping, projection mapping, as well as edge blending. And then right in the middle where it says the reception, that is actually a separate projected image within the overall image. So we created a mood, we did projection mapping and edge blending while creating that mood, yet still had the ability to put a presentation in the middle of the screen. So just different applications that you can't do with anything other than projection devices. So, you know, keep that in mind when we're talking with customers. Look at the different things that we can do that are not the norm, that are what's the norm traditionally been for projectors themselves. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Rich. We actually have a question from Sarah again. Is there anything we need to work into a service contract in the care and maintenance of these projectors?
Is there anything that you need to work into the contract of the care and maintenance? You know, I can't say nothing, because depending on the projector, there are filters in certain ones. So I would definitely build in, you know, if you're looking at the PH series, I would build in a maintenance contract to take care of some of the cleaning of the filters. And that wouldn't be intervals realistically less than 10,000 hours. But for the PX 602 and the 502, you probably don't have to really worry so much about that. But it all really depends on the environment itself. And so when I say that, the environment may be a dirty environment, which is still pulling in dust to the projector. And so we want to make sure that even the vent holes are not getting, you know, clogged up so that it breathes properly. But in a, you know, in a well-controlled, clean environment, there's realistically not that much to worry about. That being said, another thing to point out is that the warranty and the projectors themselves is 3 years. The laser module itself will have 12,000 hours, so we will warrant it for that. So, I mean, there's ways around the maintenance contracts scenario so that you can come in and still make money in that respect. But for the most part, it's a little bit better from the end user standpoint to not have to deal with that. But I'm sure, you know, some of you are worried about that. That's some margin that you end up making up purely on the basis of, you know, sending a technician out there every year or every 6 months to make sure the system's running. I don't honestly think we want to get away from that. To be, you know, that's my opinion. I think we still want to make sure everything is good. So you could still build that into a service contract that way.
Thank you, Rich. And Sarah also wanted to know if the color wheel needed to be replaced halfway.
That's a great question, and you're probably going to hear many different answers. The color wheel is going to be the one piece, the color wheel or phosphor wheel will be the one piece within the system that may not last as long as everything else when we're talking about the laser engine itself. For NEC, we're working on a solution to offer that color wheel or phosphor wheel change out separate from the laser module. So instead of, some manufacturers won't even tell you that they can change out the laser module. Some will say, okay, you can change out the laser module, which includes the color wheel and phosphor wheel. So if they go bad, you have to change the whole system. We're in the process of making sure that we can change out the color wheel and phosphor wheel separate to the rest of the engine, so that if they need to be replaced before that 20,000 hours or before that 12,000 hours in the warranty, we can do so without having to replace the entire system. That's the best answer that I can provide right now.
Thank you,
yeah,
Rich.
it's the one concern. Nobody's going to make a projector, just so we are on the understanding. We're not there to make a projector that is completely no maintenance. I mean, regardless, think of your car, think of your dishwasher, think of your laundry devices, whether it's a washer or a dryer. it's still got moving parts, and once it has moving parts inside, there's always going to be the potential to have some kind of repair completed. In this situation, it's the color wheel or the phosphor wheel. Mind you, don't make that scare you or your customers, because if you're selling DLP projectors today, you're selling projectors with color wheels. And realistically, that has never been brought up I've been doing this for 27 years. No, DLP projectors has not been around that long. But I've never had a customer worry about, with a single chip DLP projector, when will I have to change my color wheel? Certain manufacturers are starting to bring that up when we're talking solid state, because they won't have a color wheel. However, that specific manufacturer won't allow you to change the laser module, because the LCD panels will be dead long before. So don't let that be a detractor from you promoting or selling the product. Okay? So now I'm going to move forward, and you're going to notice that some of these bullet points, depending on the product, are very similar. So I'll try to grab just the ones that are pertinent to that particular product. But I'll start with the P502 series. It's a WL and an HL. That's wide XGA in 1080p. It's 5,000 lumens as the model number dictates, as well as the resolution as the part number dictates. It has horizontal and vertical lens shift. They're both mechanical. 20,000 hours of laser life, so we say virtually maintenance-free. They're solid state, of course. They have a built-in HD-based port, as well as a separate LAN connection. So for those customers that want to place it on the LAN and for asset management purposes, the separate LAN port from the HD-based port. The reason being is that control, as well as most customers aren't attaching the HD-based to the network. They're just using that for the video and audio. Has dual HDMI inputs. Has HDMI over 3D, or HDMI 3D for Blu-ray components. 20 watts of audio. Horizontal vertical keystone. Image Express Lite, or wireless image utility. What that allows us to do is send images directly from a device, whether it's a PC or a tablet or a smartphone, to the projector. So we can do that, as well as advanced networking features. Next.
Rich, I have another question, this time from Randall. He wants to know, can you wirelessly connect from a GoPro cam to these projectors?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know. I would think, because I'm going to say no, and the reason I'm going to say no is because the projector has an access point, but you typically have to either use our wireless image utility or Image Express Lite software on the external device to transmit the image to the projector. So unless the device has Miracast, and even if it doesn't have Miracast, I'm not positive at this moment if it does support that or not. That's a fantastic question. We'll have to get back to everybody on that question. So
okay,
moving on to the PX series. So sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
We actually have another question, Rich. Is this utility supported by Android and iOS by Jaron?
Okay, the Image Express utility is basically an Android or Windows type of environment, where the wireless image utility, the WIU, that's for iOS. So we have two different names for the different operating systems.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay.
That's all for now.
So moving on to the PX602, there's two flavors there, the wide XGA as well as the wide UXGA. There's 6,000 lumens, horizontal and vertical lens shift, as opposed to what the P series was, is mechanical. These are powered controls, and then powered zoom and focus with lens memory. 20,000 hours of lamp life. As you can see, it's typically the same type of connections, except for instead of dual HDMI, this also has a display port. It has edge blending built in. So the P502 series, if you wanted to do edge blending, you have to do that with external devices and create the edge blend on a separate piece. Where with the PX series and PH series, you can actually do the edge blending internal to the projector and store it there. Stacking correction works in conjunction with the same software that we use for edge blending, so we can stack projectors to create a redundancy situation. Tilt-free in portrait mode, both the 50 series and 602 series are the same. With the 602, we move into the bayonet style lenses, so we have more flexibility from an installation standpoint. We're not locked into a certain range for that screen size. So that's one of the major differences. Both the 502 and the 602 are considered single chip DLP. Next slide. Moving on up is the PH1202HL. This is a 3-chip DLP projector, 12,000 lumens, but a 1080p native resolution. Again, powered horizontal vertical lens shift, focus, and zoom with lens memory. It is a proprietary sealed optical system. You can see down at the bottom right-hand corner, what we're attempting to show you there is actually a completely sealed optical assembly that's internal to the projector. And I don't know if a video would work. We were going to use a video for it. If you can click on that image down there, could you possibly do that? I don't know if it's going to work. Nope, you'll have to pull the arrow back to that and pull it over to that image and see if it will, if you click on it. Yeah, it's trying to play it, but it's not in the video. It's not on the PC that's running the presentation. So what we actually did is have a video that allows us to show smoke being injected into the projector and not being transferred into that optical assembly. So it's extremely important from a contamination standpoint on the digital device itself, so you would never have any kind of distortion in the image in the entire optical system. So it's a proprietary system that they've developed. We're showing it here, but I think the patent has been applied for or been given, so it's okay. But it's a pretty good system. So for those applications where they're really have the ability to have, a lot of dust or a lot of smoke in the environment, this system will prevent anything from getting into the optical system.
I apologize, Rich. I wasn't able to get the link to work on that embedded link for the video.
That's okay. No, it's not that big of a deal. I can talk to it, so that was fine. But as you can see, most everything about the projector itself, from the PX, PH, in the 3 different PH projectors, they're the same. And the reason being, the brains internal are they're basically exactly the same. So then on the next slide, we have the PH1201QL. So this is a 3-chip DLP, 12,000 lumens, but it is a native 4K resolution. So it's 4096 by 2160. So it is the only 4K resolution projector that we have in our lineup that is business projector design. So it's not a digital cinema. Powered horizontal vertical controls, whether it's lens shift, focus, or zoom. You can see the difference in technology. The technology is basically the same. However, there's dual HDMI. There will be dual digital or display port, dual 3D or 3G SDI, and then dual DVI-D. The reason that there's dual channel is because it's a 4K resolution. So most PCs have to have dual outputs in order to have 4K. So it's 2K at 30 hertz on each input, each channel. So that's why you see the dual DVI, dual HDMI, dual 3G SDI. So you'll have a 2K 30 hertz signal coming into each channel, creating a 4K 60 hertz image. Edge blending, of course, and then bayonet style lenses, and then the horizontal vertical keystone to square the image. So this is the extreme high end of our system. To give you an idea, I didn't talk about pricing on the other product, but just to give you an idea, and not to scare any of you, but this is approximately $170,000 price point. That's the MSRP. But the big thing here is this is going to be very specialized verticals, and so I mentioned some of the other verticals, but realistically, you're talking with car manufacturers, graphics design companies, rental and staging, jewelry design companies, and believe it or not, a story from last year. We demonstrated this to Tiffany's in New York, and they thought it was fantastic because when they design new jewelry, they always show a presentation to the rest of the company to show them what their new lineup is going to be for the year. And this was the only product that they found on the market that could actually demonstrate the true wow factor, as we say. That's probably the biggest thing, is the wow factor that would be provided or needed to demonstrate the new jewelry to the rest of the company on a big screen. So it was something that they thought was a fantastic idea, and they're, we're finalizing some sales with Tiffany in New York just to, show them what we could do with the projector. So just a couple different verticals that you not necessarily would think of, but there's not everybody in the world would need a 4K native resolution projector, and those are a couple of those verticals that would really need it. I think from that point, if we go to the next slide, I would be done from the presentation standpoint, so then we can open it up if anybody else has more questions for me, and we can try and take care of you in that sense.
Thank you, Rich. We've had some great questions so far. Does anybody have any other questions for Rich? Please let us know in the question box, and we'll be happy to answer them. I do want to go back to that question from Sarah, Rich. She wanted to clarify it wasn't a brightness question as much as an assurance of consistency, performance, and contrast ratio.
Well, one of the biggest advantages of SSL is the fact that we have a consistent brightness. We have the ability to keep the brightness at a certain level and to control it so that they're not seeing after a few hundred hours, the light fall off dramatically, as you typically would find with lamp-based devices. So when you look at a lamp-based device, usually it's within a few hundred hours you'll see some drop off in the brightness. But then, depending on the brightness of the projector, you may see that fall off to 50% at 1,500 hours. Or you may see it fall off at 2,000 hours, depending on the lamp system. With laser or solid state, you won't see that happen until 20,000 hours. So there's a major difference there. So that's one of the things that keep that consistent brightness across the board.
Great, thank you, Rich. I'm still waiting for more questions. I see a question. What are the contrast ratios for these models? Maybe it was displayed and we missed it. This is from Jaron.
Yeah, we didn't realistically put any contrast ratio levels up there. There's a lot of information that I did leave off the presentation just to try and get to what we feel is probably more pertinent information from the perspective of not just basic specs. The specs, depending on the product, are anywhere from 2,000, well, I'm going to say realistically 2,000 up to 15,000 to 1 contrast ratio. The lowest being the PH1201QL at about 2,000, and the highest being 15,000 at the P502 series. So it just depends on the model. The PX602 and the other PH1202, I'm not positive off the top of my head. Sorry about that, but we can look at the brochure and find that out.
Thank you, Rich. We answered Jaron's questions. Does anybody else have any more questions for Rich before we wrap it up?
Diana, this is Danielle. One thing I wanted to mention from a channel marketing promotion standpoint, as a reminder, some of you may have seen that we have a extended 5-year warranty promotion going on the PX602 WL and UL series that Rich mentioned today. So that's just a reminder if you've got customers interested. Again, it's a free upgraded 5-year warranty on those specific projector models. So if you do have any questions or need additional information, you can of course contact your IAVI rep who will have that.
Thank you, Danielle. I think we are all ready to wrap up now. I don't see any more questions. We want to thank you again, Danielle and Rich. It's been a great session today, very informative, and we look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.